Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Conversations of Excellence. I am Stella BIDA. I'm so excited for today because we will be spending the next minutes with a beautiful, powerful woman who has made history. She has made history at the Winter Olympic Games in 2018, and she has been the first ever African and Black woman to actually compete in skeleton at the Olympics. Simidele, welcome to the
Ah,
Conversations of Excellence. I'm
thank
welcoming
you.
Simidele ADEAGBO.
Thank you so much for having me. It's an honor to be here, and thank you for that wonderful and warm introduction. Really appreciate it.
I'm so excited for the next minutes that we're going to be spending together. I was wondering, before we deep dive into the conversation, is there anything that you want the people who are listening to us to know about you as a starter?
As a starter, wow, that is a very intriguing question because what do you tell people as a starter? You should know that in addition to me being an Olympic skeleton racer,
Hmm.
I am a sister, I'm a daughter, I'm a friend, I'm a traveler, I'm an adventurer, and I am a follower of Christ. Those are just a few ways to describe me outside of being an Olympian. That's what I want you to know about me as we start. Oh, and I was once a body double for Serena Williams. So add that to the list.
Well, that's beautiful. That's great insight. I love the starter. The starters are very important. Wow.
Yes.
I know we're going to have so many discover about you just beyond being that Olympian. But before we start, I do have a question because it's through that, that experience in your life that we met. Um, the day we met, you showed a video. I think it was a video around being first and being first lasting forever.
Yes, yes.
It was so powerful, a very short clip. But I wanted to get from you why the experience at the Olympics on being the first ever was so important to bring into your life.
Well, being first is so much deeper than just a gold medal, and that quest to the Olympics was more than just that. I think when people think about the Olympics, it's always about, getting on that podium, which is great. And as an athlete, I always compete to the best of my ability, and it's always the goal to strive for that. But this particular journey was really rooted in purpose. Skeleton was a sport that I didn't know anything about prior to a few months to until the Olympics, before the Olympics. And I ended up being inspired to take part in the sport because I learned that no African or Black woman had ever competed in the sport at the Olympic Games. And to me, I really saw an opportunity to really expand representation. The continent of Africa is very severely underrepresented at the Winter Olympics. So there were only 7 countries at the 2018 Winter Games that were from the continent of Africa at the Olympics. And when you think about the size the continent of Africa is and the population, of just over 1 billion people, is disproportional to then how many people end up being there at the Olympics to represent an African country. And
Mm,
so I saw that as something that I thought that perhaps by, me breaking this barrier, I could help to address. Then also along with that is really changing the narrative in terms of what's possible from an athlete that looks like myself,
mm,
coming from the continent of Africa, a Black woman, and really trying to transform that narrative in winter sports and showing people what's possible. And then through that, bringing some positivity as well for the continent of Africa, and really showing people that excellence that this platform is all about. It's really highlighting the excellence that can come from the continent of Africa.
mm.
That's how I ended up going headfirst down an ice track. Like I said, the first of being the first to be there
Mm.
was much more significant to me than any medal that I could have won.
Wow. To be honest with you, I have goosebumps hearing you, listening to you. Um, how how do we make that decision of going towards something where we actually don't have a 100% role model to represent where we're going?
Mm. Yeah, as a leader, as a trailblazer, as someone who is first, you are not going to have that blueprint. And
Mhm.
that's something you have to be prepared for. That's something you have to face head on, and really be open to building your own roadmap. That is the beauty of being first. You get to do it in a way that hasn't been done before. The challenge with that, as you said, is that it's easier to follow something that already exists and just plug in. But when you're building on your own, you're facing so much that's unknown, and it can be really scary. But what I learned through my path is if you're just willing to just put one step in front of the other, one foot in front of the other, and learn and just be brave enough to try, then eventually you're going to get to where you want to go. So, without a roadmap, it can be scary, but I would just encourage people to just take those steps, especially the first step. I think that's the most critical step because a
Mm.
lot of us don't even end up like exploring because we are, too afraid of the possibility that it won't work out. So,
Ah,
my thought is let go of the outcome and just take the steps and see where that will take you. I think that for me was really, if I had to say a secret to my success, I don't know if there's
mhm,
one secret, but
mhm.
particularly in my journey to the Olympics, I was really not concerned about the outcome as much as I was the process. And I just focused on being present, doing what I could in the moment, and taking one step at a time. And eventually I knew that the outcome would take care of itself. So just take that first step. That's my advice to someone who doesn't have a blueprint or a roadmap.
Hmm.
Just start building it.
Hmm. Well, you talked about the scary aspects about starting the whole process. And
Hmm.
I was curious to know your perspective on sharing the scary sides of the
Hmm.
processes we go through towards, what we're aiming for or towards success. Do you think that it is important to share about the scary aspects too with others?
With others, yes. And it's actually interesting that you mentioned that because um, I was watching, I don't know if you know the American actress and producer, creator, Issa Rae.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, so the other day, earlier this week, I was just watching some YouTube videos about her. So I
Mm,
guess she recently is launching like a line of hair care products and partnered with somebody.
mm,
And so this is like Issa Rae now, the Issa Rae that we know, the person who is, this renowned, Hollywood presence and force.
mhm.
And it was interesting because the interviewer that was interviewing her for a popular talk show here in the US happened to have worked with her like 10 years ago when she was like a
Oh,
correspondent. Nobody knew her. And
wow.
so they were just joking amongst themselves that, wow, he was saying, who would have known then when he was working with her that, she would be in this space. And so that really prompted my interest. And I just started looking on YouTube for old interviews of her because I wanted to see that evolution. And to your point, I think that not a lot of us share the makings of that,
Mm,
so we only see Issa Rae now and like we think it happened overnight, but I actually learned a lot more about her by watching an interview from her 10 years ago than this one that I saw this week, where she talked about, some of the mistakes that she made, trying to break into, Hollywood and getting her content on TV, and not doing it on her terms, and how she had to learn some of those hard lessons up front, and things like that, and staying true to herself. So the messiness, if I will call it that, or the scary parts, the tough parts, I found were so much more compelling. And we often don't see that, especially in this digital age where we're all scrolling on Instagram and
Yeah.
everybody looks like life is made, you know?
Yes.
We don't
Like
get to see
just a few seconds. It's
it.
done.
It looks so instant.
Microwave.
Exactly.
Yes,
So
yes.
we don't get to see those darker times, those challenging times, and how the people grew from them and what they took from that. And I mean, unfortunately, but fortunately, my journey was almost microwavable in the sense that it happened to be short and intense. But even within that, there were a lot of challenges, and I often don't get to talk enough about them. And I think, there's definitely space to learn from that.
Mm,
There were moments where, I had second guessed, was this going to be possible? Um, there was one particular moment when I was doing the sport, like kind of in my first week. I decided to go to the world's like scariest track first, which
mm,
people don't usually recommend starting with the scariest and most dangerous one first, but, I felt like that for me was the right path because I knew I was already on a shortened window, so I thought that maybe if I could tackle that scary track first, that would actually propel me further, faster.
mhm,
But with that, it was came a lot of fear because at this track, you're going at such higher speeds than any other track in the world. And, a few days into it, I actually made a huge mistake and ended up going completely in the wrong direction, feet first down the track instead of head first. It was a moment that really shook me up. And a moment that made me question, what am I doing? Why am I doing this again? I could have lost my life actually. But through that, I think that, I learned that there's going to be a lot of moments like this if this is what I'm going to choose to do. Because especially for my sport, there's a steep learning curve, and you do have to make those type of mistakes to learn what not to do. So in that moment, I had to even deepen my commitment and say, this is what I've signed up for. It is going to be scary, and I have to decide how I'm going to cope with that fear. And the way I ended up coping with it was realizing that I needed to focus on my bigger purpose, my bigger mission for doing it. If it became just about me, then it would be easy to just say, you know what, I'm cold, I'm tired, this thing is scary, and put it aside. But every time I went back to, this is bigger than me, that
mm.
anchored me and helped me continue to move forward. So, but yeah, so there were many moments like that. But people don't often get to see that. They just remember you at the Olympics, performing for an audience of millions. And it looks like, wow, so inspiring and so great. And it is, but know that there are peaks and valleys that came with that.
Ah, wow. Yeah. It's it's beautiful. And when you said that, it's so beautiful what you're sharing. At a moment you said that you anchored yourself on the fact that you're doing something which is bigger than yourself.
Mhm.
And it gets me to ask you the question. I know that you spend a lot of time inspiring women and young girls,
Yeah.
and you even like built some leadership programs to give them the core essence of leadership to help them for their future. I wanted to know, why do you spend so much time doing that, and what is the underlying reason you're doing that? What does it mean for you to have
Mm.
chosen that way of, giving back?
Yes. When I got back from the Olympics, I thought, well, that was awesome. That was an amazing experience. But what next? What do I do with this platform, with this opportunity to now take some of these experiences and use it to further, you know, um, the continent that I did it for in the first place. And for me, I feel that African women sometimes we don't get the love that we deserve in terms of the world really knowing our worth. And I felt that
Mm,
if I could just go and pour into women on the continent, young women in particular, to help them be the best leaders that they could be, that even if they are not athletes or they don't want anything to do with the Olympics, but just helping to kind of unlock the best within them, that that would only help further kind of my thoughts on, helping to shape the continent, the future of the continent. And so for me, it just felt like, a no-brainer in a sense that um, it felt very natural to go and just mentor young ladies across the continent. And so I thought that if I could combine some of the things that I've learned along the way and invest that time, I think the time is the most important thing. And what I saw as I was going across the continent and connecting with the young women that I mentor is that, sometimes people can feel so far away, people of influence anyways. And again, back to the Instagram, you're seeing them, hey, Beyonce looks amazing, but are you actually going to get to meet Beyonce or
yeah.
any of these other people that they might look up to? And I am not saying I'm Beyonce by any means, but I'm saying that I hope that, you know, just having the opportunity to pour into the young ladies, invest time in them, I can see that it really builds them up, just knowing that somebody has invested that time in them. And I believe it's a investment that has a high payoff, a high return. And through this, I think that, it's only helping unlock their potential in so many ways, and hopefully sparks inspiration and gives them ideas about what they might want to do because they too can be first.
Mm,
Maybe not the first skeleton racer, but thinking about what does that mean for them? How do they want to break barriers in their own life? And what does that mean for them? I think is a very important message to share with them. And so it just means a lot to me to play whatever role that I can in helping to nurture the next generation of leaders, particularly female leaders on the continent of Africa.
mm. Oh, I love it. I love it when you talked about also breaking barriers,
Mhm.
like daring to break barriers. And when you say that, I see you like you are preparing the future leaders of change who break barriers, who show the possibilities. And I was wondering, especially in these times that we're going through, it's like
Mhm.
change, there's like an air of change which is necessary. Um, what do you think are, from your experience, the skills which are required to drive change with um, driving change from a space of, how can I say that? Driving change with trust.
Mm.
Mm,
Um, there's not one thing in particular that I think you can do, but there is kind of a framework that I use throughout my journey, and
mm,
when I look back, these are the pillars that help me drive change, and these are things that I think we can all do, and it actually ties back to that idea of being first.
mhm,
And really each letter within that standing for a different specific thing that all of us can do. So to drive change, it requires focus.
Mm,
That's what the F stands for. What are you going to focus on? You have to be clear on that. And for me, as I started my journey, I was clear in that I want to be an Olympian and I want to do that in a way that's going to change the narrative
mhm,
uh, of the continent of Africa, of winter sports. That's what's driving me. That's what I'm focusing on. And then the I is imagination. To create change, you really have to have a wild imagination.
I love
Because
you saying that. I love you saying wild.
it has to be wild. You have to be crazy enough to think that, that what you're going to focus on is actually possible. And the imagination part comes from actually thinking about the ways to make it possible. So I think a lot of times in this environment, sometimes where people tell us what we can't do. And I think naturally as human beings, we think about all the challenges, but the imagination is saying, no, think about all the possibilities. What are all of the different ways that you can bring to life what you want to focus on? Like the possibilities are endless, and just allow yourself to let your imagination run wild, let it go, be free with it, dream crazy. And then the R stands for risk taking. If you want to
Mhm,
create change, risks are inevitable. And you have to get to that space where you know that that's just part of it. Um, you have to be comfortable with that. And you have to know that sometimes comfort is the number one thing that gets in the way between who you are now or what you are now and what you want to do going forward, the change that you want to make. Comfort might be getting in the way of that. So you have to move comfort out of the way
mhm,
and take risks, however big or small, and just be comfortable doing that. So that is also important. And then the S stands for start now. And this really speaks
mm,
to what I mentioned earlier. Too many of us just stay kind of frozen, not wanting to take that step. So I think we have to operate if we want to create change in the urgency of now, and not be willing to wait. What are we waiting for? Do it, just start now, that I think when I look at change makers, they're operating in the now. They're ready to start now. And then the T stands for trust your instincts. As a change maker, I think we have to know what's authentic to us. We have to know our voice. We have to know our strengths, and we need to be operating within that space and let the power of our own authenticity shine. So that for me is kind of like my approach to change making. It's not any one of those one things, but I think it's a combination of those different things that working together can help you drive change as a leader.
mm. Thank you for that structured, approach. It's
Mhm.
very, very, it's a rich experience what you're sharing.
Thank
Um,
you.
it's always the last minutes are always so difficult because I see the time and I'm like, oh, Stella, you have to end this. So we're heading towards the last minutes, and I wanted to know, it's a question I love to ask because we've all been through that moment of childhood. And
Hmm.
I always love to ask, if you had the 10-year-old version of yourself in front of you, what would you tell her?
Hmm. Let me think back to where I was when I was 10 years old. My family moved around a lot when I was younger. So 10 years old, where was I? I was probably in Canada, Calgary, Canada.
Mhm.
So I'm thinking back to try to get myself in that mind frame of what that 10-year-old might have been thinking. I think at that time I already had started playing some level of sports. This is when I first started being introduced to sports and discovering the sports. But I see that 10-year-old and I see a lot of the same qualities in myself as I see now. this kind of relentless drive, this work ethic. My mom tells me, and I don't remember half of these stories, but because we were living in Canada at the time, and Canada can be cold at times. And so one of the first sports that I played was softball. And so, softball is played outside in general. And there it was cold, and so it was snowing. And she was like telling me that practice was going to be canceled. Like, there's no way they're going to have practice. It is snowing, and you can't have practice. And I said, no, I am going to practice, snow or no snow. And she said that I marched out to practice, and it was canceled, of course. But I'm sharing that story because I still see that same girl today.
Oh, oh,
And
wow.
so I think that that's the beauty of human beings when you look back, and I think a lot of who we are is already baked in from that early. So if anything, I would tell that girl, keep going, don't change. Allow that part of yourself to flourish, to thrive, because that's what's going to get you far. When I think about my successes and the things that I've accomplished, it's that drive, that work ethic that has made that possible. So
Mm.
I would say keep showing up for practice even when it's snowing. Listen to your mom, but
But I can imagine you actually at 10 years old saying, no, I'm going to practice. Snow, no snow, sun.
no snow, no snow. But it's those qualities will get you a long way. So just know that you have what it takes already.
Mm.
Trust that, believe that, and let it take you far.
Wow. Oh, okay. So it's the end. And before the end, I always like to ask a little last question, like, what is the question I've not asked that you think would really help people to, for example, take that first step?
Um, well, a common question I think people have is like, well, what do you do about fear? Like,
Mm,
you're scared. And I say, well, that's part of the process. That's not going to go away. So just
mm,
let fear live alongside you. But know that fear shouldn't distract you. It can be a distraction, but we just have to learn to manage it. And
mm,
so I think it's good for us to be aware of the situation,
mhm,
the challenges that we're up against, but know that you still have to move forward in spite of them. That you have to know that fear is part of the process, but we be willing to push back against it. Don't let fear win. Don't let that distraction take over of where you're meant to be. So just let the fear be there, but just keep focused on where you want to go and take those steps even with the fear.
mm. Wow, beautiful. And thank you for sharing that. It takes courage and to get into that human side of all of us and recognize that Mr. Fear is always there.
Yes,
I
they
can see
Mr.
him now, like next to me.
He's not gonna go away. But after you've taken that step, even with the fear, you learn that, wow, okay, that wasn't as bad as I thought. And then it gets better and better and better. And this is coming from the person who had to hurl themselves headfirst down a giant ice mountain at 90 miles an hour. Of
Yeah,
course, I was scared.
yeah.
Fear was all over.
Mm,
It is a very daunting thing to do the sport that I do. Even still now, it doesn't get easier at times. Like, I'm more used to it, but there's still a lot of fear involved when I go down the track at times. But over time, I've learned to manage that a lot better.
mhm,
And, especially in the early days, I set small goals for myself.
mhm,
I manage my expectations around the outcomes and just learn to just do little things. So my first goal, the first time I went down the track, don't scream. That was the goal.
Yeah.
That's such a silly goal,
Yeah.
but I thought if I can make it and I don't scream, that is a win. And so I did exactly that. It was a terrible run, but I didn't scream, so I accomplished my goal. And, then the fear got less and less and less as I built more and more confidence, because the more confidence that you start building, then the fear starts reducing. So but
Oh.
if you don't take that first step, you'll never realize that and go through that process, and the fear will just fill you completely up. But, you have to take the steps, and then it'll start minimizing as your confidence grows.
Mm. Oh, thank you, Simidele, for your openness, your sharing. Like you really took the time, even like what you just talked about. It's it's really being open to just the human being that you are. And thank you for your beautiful sharings, really.
No worries. Thank you for the opportunity to share, and, I hope that, whoever is hearing this from wherever you are in the world, that you know that I am not, superhuman. I am a human, and just like everybody else. But I think action is the word that I would use, that really helped me break the barriers that I've broken. And I try to just take those lessons from those 100 days and make this a lifestyle now.
Mm,
That 100 days doesn't have to stay in those 100 days and I never break barriers again. Like, I try to think like this now across everything that I do in life, and really try to not let, that fear hold me back. The fear of the unknown, the fear of the outcome, the fear of the failure. I rather take action and see what happens. And again, I'm not superhuman. I'm just a human being. So I know that if I can do it, anyone out there can too.
oh, beautiful. Simidele, I'm sure for the people who are watching, they're like, how can I continue following this beautiful human being talking here? So where do they need to go? And I know you're preparing also for the game. So how
Yeah.
can we cheer you? Where do we go?
Yes. So I am on social media on various platforms. So on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, it's at Simi Slays. So Slays, Simi is spelled Simi, and then
Mhm,
Slays is Sleighs.
mhm.
Well, that's one word. So you can find me on any of those platforms. On LinkedIn, my full name, Simidele ADEAGBO, SIMIDELE ADEAGBO, if you're on LinkedIn. I am training for my second Olympic Games, which is coming up in less than a year. It's in February of 2022 in
Mhm.
Beijing, China. And so I'm really excited about that. I've also taken up a new sport. In addition to skeleton, I've taken up bobsled.
Oh,
And
wow.
so that is super exciting. I'm constantly trying to push the limits and continue to just, see what's possible for myself and push
Mhm.
myself. So that's really exciting. Yeah.
Oh, wonderful. We're so excited for you,
Yes.
Simidele, and we're looking forward to being part of your journey of self-discovery so openly with us. Simidele, oh, we have to come to an end. I'm already crying. So thank you so much for being part of the conversation today. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, and wish you the very best on your continued journey, as you share the excellence with the world, conversations of excellence with the world.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye bye.
Bye.